One of these trains had an actual airplane propeller and hit 143 miles an hour on the rails in 1931. Another ran backwards on purpose. One burned literal garbage that mines were throwing away. And one was so perfectly built it worked for almost 50 years. People called these machines freaks, jokes, mistakes. They were wrong. Every single one was a stroke of pure engineering genius, and by the end you'll wish they still built trains like this. Let's go. Number 10. The Camelback, Wooten Firebox. Let's start with a locomotive that looks completely wrong and was secretly brilliant. Look at a Camelback and something is clearly off. The engineer's cab isn't at the back where it belongs. It's plopped right on top of the middle of the boiler, straddling it like a saddle. People called them Mother Hubbards, and that bizarre layout wasn't a mistake. It was the solution to a genuinely clever idea. Here's the problem it solved. In the late 1800s, the anthracite coal mines of eastern Pennsylvania were drowning in their own waste. When they screened the hard coal for sale, they were left with mountains of fine, dusty leftovers called cum. As much as 20% of everything they dug up. Cum was almost worthless. Nobody wanted it. It just piled up. A reading railroad master mechanic named John Wooten looked at those waste heaps and saw free fuel. The catch: cum is hard to burn. To get it to combust, you needed an enormous, wide, shallow firebox to spread it in a thin layer with a gentle draft. So in 1877, Wooten patented exactly that. A giant firebox so wide it wouldn't fit between the driving wheels, so it had to sit above them. And that created a new problem. That massive firebox took up all the space where the cab would normally go. So the crew got split up. The engineer was moved forward, riding in a cramped little box straddling the boiler, while the poor fireman stayed at the very back, shoveling waste coal, half exposed to the weather. It was awkward. It separated the crew, and the engineer sat dangerously close to the spinning side rods. But it worked. A single Camelback could save around $2,000 a year in fuel, real money back then, by burning trash the railroad got for almost nothing. Anthracite lines like the Reading, the Jersey Central, and the Lehigh Valley loved them. That's not a joke of a locomotive, that's ingenuity, turning garbage into horsepower. Number 9. The Double Fairlie. Next, a locomotive that couldn't decide which way was forward, and that was the whole point. A Double Fairlie looks like two locomotives that crashed into each other and fused. It has a chimney at each end, a driving unit at each end, and the cab jammed in the middle. There's no front. And in the 1860s, that was a radical idea that solved a very real problem. Picture a narrow-gauge mountain railway, tiny track, brutally steep grades, and curves so tight a normal locomotive simply couldn't get around them. You needed lots of power, but a powerful engine meant a long, rigid frame, and a long, rigid frame couldn't handle the curves. It was a trap. In 1864, engineer Robert Francis Fairlie patented the escape. His design put the boiler and cab on top of two separate powered bogies, pivoting trucks, one at each end. Because every single wheel was driven, you got roughly double the power of a normal engine. Because the bogies swiveled, the locomotive could snake around the sharpest curves. And because it was completely symmetrical, it drove equally well in either direction. No turntable needed at the end of the line. A single boiler in the center, with a firebox in the middle, fed a barrel and a chimney at each end. It was a genuinely elegant answer, and it found its true home on the Festiniog Railway in the mountains of North Wales, on track just under 2 feet wide. The Festiniog's first Double Fairlie, Little Wonder, arrived in 1869 and stunned everyone. This little machine could haul 110 to 120 tons up the grades and take the curves at real speed. And here's the beautiful part. Over 150 years later, the Festiniog Railway is still running Double Fairlies. Its engine, Murd in Emrys, dates from 1879 and still works. The railway even builds brand new ones. The latest, James Spooner, entered service in 2023. It's the only place on Earth where you can regularly watch these two-headed marvels romping through the mountains. A Victorian idea, still doing the job today. That's not strange, that's timeless. Number 8. The Shay. Now let's meet a locomotive that looks like it was built wrong on purpose, because in a way it was. Walk up to a Shay from the front and you'll swear it's had an accident. The whole boiler is shoved off to one side. On the other side, a row of vertical cylinders is pumping up and down, connected to a drive shaft running the entire length of the locomotive with gears turning every wheel. It's the weirdest looking steam engine you'll ever see, and it was pure genius. The man behind it was Ephraim Shay, a logger in Michigan in the 1870s who was fed up. Loggers had to haul enormous heavy loads of timber down from the forest on cheap temporary uneven track laid straight over the rough ground, track with steep grades and vicious curves. A normal rod-driven steam locomotive, with its wheels connected directly to the pistons, would just spin, slip, and derail on stuff like that. It had too much speed and not enough grunt. Shay's insight was to gear the whole thing down. Instead of the pistons driving the wheels directly, his vertical cylinders spun a drive shaft, and that shaft turned the wheels through bevel gears, so the engine could turn many times for each slow revolution of the wheels. The result was a locomotive with monstrous low-speed pulling power that could crawl up grades and around curves that would kill a normal engine. Every axle was powered, and the flexible geared trucks let it flex over the roughest track imaginable. The boiler was offset to the left simply to balance the weight of all those cylinders and gears on the right. Lima Locomotive Works in Ohio picked up the design and built around 2,770 of them between 1880 and 1945. They were slow, often crawling at 10 or 12 miles an hour, but they were unstoppable. They opened up steep timber and mining country that no ordinary railroad could ever reach. Around 85 Shays still survive today, many hauling delighted tourists up mountain grades. An asymmetric, geared, sideways-looking oddball, and one of the most quietly ingenious steam locomotives ever built. Number 7. The Swiss Crocodile. Next we leave steam behind and climb into the Alps to meet an electric legend with a very good nickname. They call it the Crocodile, and once you see one, you get it. It has a long, low nose reaching out at each end, hinged to a boxy body in the middle, so the whole machine flexes like a reptile as it slithers through the mountains. This is the Swiss Federal Railway's C68, and it was built to conquer one of the hardest railroads on the planet. The challenge was the Gotthard Line, the steep, twisting main route through the Swiss Alps that had just been electrified after World War I. Switzerland had almost no coal of its own, but plenty of hydroelectric power, so going electric was the smart move. But the railway needed a freight locomotive that could drag heavy trains up punishing grades and still bend around tight alpine curves and tunnels. The problem was the electric motors of that era. They were huge, and they had to be mounted up high in the body, well above the axles. You couldn't just hang them on the wheels. So the engineers, led by the builders SLM and Oerlikon, came up with something clever. 2 long powered noses, each containing the big body-mounted motors, which drove the wheels through a jackshaft and connecting rods, like a steam engine's side rods, but electric. Those 2 nose units were bridged by a central section holding the cabs, the transformer, and the pantographs, and the whole thing was articulated so it could pivot around curves. It worked beautifully. The Crocodiles had superb grip, hauled heavy tonnage up the Gotthard, and they even used regenerative braking, recovering electricity on the way down the mountain. Between 1919 and 1927, 51 of them were built, and they were so good and so tough that some soldiered on until 1982. Over 60 years of service. They became the most beloved locomotives in Europe, the darling of every model railway. In 2022, the Crocodile was even named a historic mechanical engineering landmark. Strange snout, immortal design. Number 6. The Schienenzeppelin, Rail Zeppelin. At number 6, the maddest looking thing on this entire list, a train that literally tried to fly. In 1931, if you were standing on a platform between Berlin and Hamburg, you might have seen something that looked like a crashed airship gliding down the tracks. A sleek, silver, bullet-shaped machine with a giant wooden airplane propeller spinning at the back. This was the Schienenzeppelin, the Rail Zeppelin, and it is one of the boldest speed experiments in history. Its creator was Franz Krukenberg, and this is the key, he wasn't a railway engineer, he was an aircraft engineer. He had spent years designing Zeppelin airships, and he looked at the slow, heavy trains of the day and asked a wild question. What if you built a train the way you build an aircraft? Light, aerodynamic, and driven by a propeller. So that's exactly what he did. He built the body out of aluminum, shaped it like an airship to slice through the wind, and kept the whole thing astonishingly light, about 20 tons. At the back he mounted a BMW V12 aircraft engine spinning a big wooden pusher propeller. No heavy motors driving the wheels, the propeller simply pushed the whole feather-light craft down the rails. And on the 21st of June, 1931, on the line between Berlin and Hamburg, it flew. The Rail Zeppelin hit 230.2 kilometers per hour, 143 miles per hour. That's modern bullet train speed, achieved in 1931. It set a world rail speed record that would stand for more than 20 years, not beaten until 1954. To this day, it holds the record for the fastest petrol-powered rail vehicle ever. So why don't we ride propeller trains? Because that spinning wooden blade was terrifyingly dangerous next to a crowded platform, and a propeller can't easily reverse or claw a heavy train up a hill. Only one was ever built, and it never entered service. It was scrapped in 1939. But Krukenberg was right about the important thing. Lightweight plus aerodynamics equals speed, the exact principle behind every high-speed train running today. A dead end that pointed straight at the future. Number 5. The Pennsylvania S2 steam turbine. Now for a steam locomotive with no cylinders at all, and one of the cleverest drivetrains ever bolted to a steam engine. By the 1940s, the diesel was coming for steam, and the mighty Pennsylvania Railroad wasn't ready to give up. The Pennsy hauled more coal than anyone in America, and it desperately wanted to keep steam alive. So it teamed up with Baldwin and Westinghouse to try something radical. Replace the pistons entirely with a turbine, the same kind of smooth spinning power plant that drove the Navy's battleships and destroyers. The result was the Class S2, locomotive number 6200, the one and only 686 ever built, delivered in September 1944. And instead of the usual chuffing pistons hammering back and forth, it had a steam turbine spinning at high speed, geared down to the driving wheels. Here's why that's genius. A normal steam locomotive wastes a shocking amount of energy just shoving heavy pistons and rods back and forth, stopping and reversing them thousands of times a minute. A turbine just spins, smoothly, continuously in one direction. The S2's turbine drive was so efficient that only about 3% of the energy was lost in the machinery. It ran with an eerie, vibration-free smoothness, and at speed it was superb, powerful, fast, and easy on the track because there were no pounding pistons hammering the rails. But the turbine had one stubborn flaw. A direct drive turbine only wants to run efficiently in a narrow speed range. At low speed and from a dead stop, the S2 was a glutton. It drank enormous amounts of steam just getting moving. Combine that with wartime steel restrictions that made it heavier than planned, and the diesel revolution arriving at full speed, and the S2 never had a future. Just one was built, and it was scrapped around 1952. But make no mistake, a near-frictionless, cylinderless steam locomotive that hit 97% drive efficiency was a genuinely brilliant piece of engineering. It was simply born into the wrong decade. Number 4. The Pennsylvania S1 Big Engine. At number 4, the most spectacular showpiece locomotive America ever built, and a bold idea hiding inside a giant. The Pennsylvania Railroad S1 was so massive it earned a simple nickname, the Big Engine. It was the longest and heaviest rigid-frame reciprocating steam locomotive ever built, around 140 feet long with its tender and over 600,000 pounds of machine. And it wore a stunning streamlined Art Deco shell designed by the legendary industrial designer Raymond Loewy. It was, and still is, the only 6446 locomotive ever made. But the strange part, and the clever part, is what's under that shell. The S1 was a duplex. Instead of one set of cylinders driving all the wheels, it had two completely separate sets of cylinders, each driving its own pair of driving axles, all on one rigid frame. Why split it up? Because of a problem called hammer blow. In a conventional high-speed locomotive, the huge pistons and rods slamming back and forth create violent forces that pound the track and shake the whole machine, which limits how fast you can safely go. The duplex idea was elegant. Use two smaller, lighter sets of running gear instead of one giant one. Lighter reciprocating parts meant less hammer blow, which in theory meant blistering speed. The S1 rode on 84-inch driving wheels and could reportedly haul a 1,200-ton train at 100 miles an hour. The Pennsy knew it had a star. When the S1 was completed in early 1939, they sent it to the New York World's Fair, mounted it on rollers and let its giant wheels spin under steam while crowds watched. Its tender-lettered American railroads. It was the face of the future of rail travel. The reality was messier. The S1 was so long it couldn't get around many of the Pensy's own curves or onto most turntables, so it was stuck running one fast, straight stretch-out in Ohio. And with only 4 driving axles carrying all that weight, it was prone to slipping. Just one was ever built. But the duplex principle it proved was real, and it led directly to the Pensy's famous T1 fleet, a magnificent, flawed, brilliant giant. Number 3. The Southern Pacific Cab Forward. At number 3, a locomotive that solved a deadly problem by doing the one thing no one else dared, running backwards. The first time you see a Southern Pacific cab forward, your brain glitches. The cab, where the crew sits, is at the front. The long boiler stretches out behind it, and the tender is coupled to the smoke box end. The entire locomotive appears to be running backwards, and it was, completely on purpose, to save lives. The problem was Donner Pass, the legendary crossing of California's Sierra Nevada that railroaders just called the Hill. To fight off deep mountain snow, the Southern Pacific had built miles and miles of wooden snow sheds over the track, around 40 miles of them, plus dozens of tunnels. A normal locomotive climbing that grade, working flat out, would fill those enclosed sheds and tunnels with thick, choking exhaust, and the crew sat right behind the smokestack, breathing it. Crews were being genuinely asphyxiated up there. The fix was almost absurdly simple, and it reportedly came from crews who just started turning their locomotives around and running them cab first to get their heads into clean air ahead of the smoke. The Southern Pacific took that idea and built it in. And they could only do it because their locomotives burned oil, not coal. There was no coal to shovel, so the fuel could simply be piped forward from the tender to the firebox at the front. No fireman stuck at the back with a shovel. The payoff was huge. The crew now rode out front in fresh air, with an absolutely commanding view of the track ahead, decades before diesels made the cab in front layout normal. The Southern Pacific built these cab forwards for years, and the final largest class, the AC-12, came from Baldwin during World War II. Each was essentially a giant articulated locomotive turned 180 degrees, weighing over 1 million pounds with its tender. Only one survives, number 4294, preserved indoors at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. A locomotive that ran backwards to keep its crew alive and got a better view in the bargain. Pure problem-solving genius. Number 2. The Pennsylvania GG1. At number 2, a locomotive so good, so reliable, and so beautiful that it worked for half a century, and people still call it the greatest ever built. The Pennsylvania Railroad GG1 doesn't look strange so much as impossibly ahead of its time. It's a long, low, streamlined electric locomotive with a graceful curved body and a cab set right in the center. It first appeared in 1934, and it would still be hauling trains in the 1980s. Everything about it was clever. The GG1 was built to be bidirectional. It drove equally well in either direction, so it never needed turning. Its body was actually 2 frames joined by an articulation joint, which let this big machine track smoothly through curves at high speed. And that central cab wasn't a style choice. It came from tragedy. The GG1's boxy predecessor, with the crew at the front, had suffered a horrific grade-crossing wreck, so the engineers deliberately moved the crew to the protected center of the locomotive, cushioned by machinery at both ends. Then came the finishing touch. The famous industrial designer Raymond Loewy was brought in, and he made 2 brilliant calls. He had the steel shell welded smooth instead of riveted, and he added those clean pinstripes. The result was one of the most gorgeous machines ever to run on rails. Loewy himself called it one of the good memories of his life. But looks were the least of it. The GG1 pulled power from overhead wires and made around 4,620 horsepower continuously, with the ability to surge to nearly double that for short bursts. It cruised at 100 miles an hour, hauling heavy passenger trains between New York and Washington. And it was famously, almost unbelievably reliable, with low maintenance costs and a genius for just showing up and doing the job, year after year. 139 were built. They served the Pennsylvania, then Penn Central, then Conrail, then Amtrak. A career of roughly 50 years, longer than almost any American locomotive design in history. It's widely regarded as the finest electric locomotive North America ever produced. Not strange, just perfect. Number 1. The Beyer-Garratt. And at number 1, the strangest looking steam locomotive concept of them all, and arguably the single most successful weird design in world history. Look at a Beyer-Garratt, and nothing makes sense at first. The boiler and cab float in the middle of the machine, seemingly suspended over empty space. The wheels and cylinders are gathered into 2 completely separate engine units, one at the very front, one at the very back, with the boiler cradled on a frame slung between them. It looks like an accident. It was a masterpiece. The idea came to engineer Herbert Garrett, who patented it in 1907 and partnered with the British firm Beyer-Peacock in Manchester. His concept split the locomotive into 3 parts, 2 powered engine units at the ends, each carrying its own water and fuel, and a central bridge frame holding the boiler and cab, pivoting freely between them. And that layout unlocked everything. Because there were no driving wheels underneath the boiler, the engineers could hang a huge, deep, efficient firebox down in that empty space, giving the Garratt enormous power for its weight. Because the two engine units pivoted, it could snake around the sharpest curves. And because the heavy water and fuel sat directly over the driving wheels, it had tremendous grip. In one machine, you got roughly double the power of a normal locomotive, which meant one Garratt and one crew could do the work of two. This was the near-perfect articulated locomotive, and the world knew it. Garratts were built by the thousand and sent almost everywhere except North America, Africa, Australia, Asia, South America, Europe. In South Africa, they built some of the largest steam engines on the continent. In East Africa, the giant 59-class Garratts were among the most powerful narrow-gauge locomotives ever made. In Australia, the enormous big boy Garratts hauled New South Wales freight right up to the very last day of mainline steam there, in 1973. They conquered light, twisting, mountainous railways all over the planet that no rigid locomotive could ever have served. A machine that looks like it's coming apart in the middle, and it was one of the most brilliant, most successful locomotive ideas ever conceived. The strangest genius of them all. Which of these 10 was your favorite? Tell me in the comments, and if you want a part 2 on the strangest machines that pushed things even further, let me know, and I'll build that video next.